So something you might be questioning if you're just starting out on making content to market your business, or maybe you've been doing it for a while and you're a little bit confused about what to do in terms of, do you focus on going viral with your content? Do you focus on growing an audience? Do you focus on selling to the people that's already in your audience? Like, what the hell are you supposed to do? Now, there's tons and tons of conflicting advice out there. You've got some big creators who are posting lots of content saying, don't bother going viral. You need to focus on selling to your audience. If you're not generating leads and you're not generating sales from your audience, your content's absolutely pointless. And all this, that and the other. And if you're anything like me, you're probably having a little bit of an head explosion at the moment, trying to figure out exactly what it is to do. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this topic from my own experience and talk a little bit about what I'm aiming to do this year with my content and how that's kind of going against the grain of what the bigger creators are kind of saying at the moment and what certain people have told me to do, that again, I'm kind of going the opposite direction. So when it comes to your content, there's a lot of noise out there at the moment where people are saying, look, if you're posting content and it's not generating your leads or you're not getting any sales from it, then you might as well not bother posting it. And I can understand the argument in terms of that. You know, we're all posting content for a specific reason. We want to grow our business and we want to earn money. And it's as simple as that. I don't think there's any of us out there that are posting content for our business that hasn't got that end goal in mind. But the issue with this is that it's kind of missing a little bit of a crucial point, I think. And let's say, for instance, my audience at the moment. So across social media, I'm coming up to just over 9,000 followers. Most of that, about 95% of that, is on my LinkedIn channel, is on my LinkedIn account, where it's taken me 3 or 4 years now to grow an audience of just over 9,000 people. And then I've got a few hundred across TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. And I've done pretty well from my audience so far in terms of getting sales. And I certainly have had sales and leads come from the content that I've put out, which is the reason why I've continued to keep putting the content out. But most of my sales, in all honesty, have actually come from me actively going out and speaking to my audience and getting in the DMs and connecting with people and actually reaching out to people and talking to those people, far and above me posting a piece of content and somebody actually coming into me inbound. And that's just the reality of it. Now, one thing you've probably heard quite a lot of is, in any given market or in any given audience, you've probably only got between 1% and 3% of those people who are ever in a position where they're ready to actually buy something from you. Now, if, for instance, you've got an audience of 9,000, like I have, 1% to 3% of that audience is a tiny, tiny, tiny number of people. It's not enough to rely on those people to just instantly be coming into you and asking to buy your product or your service. You're not going to run a sustainable business waiting on that. And that's the reason why, for me, like I say, the outreach and getting out there and talking to people has been what's driven most of the business for me through social media. Now, when it comes to deciding what strategy to take with your content, and whether you should be focusing on selling to your audience through your content, or whether you should be more focused on actually growing your audience and looking at ways to build more attention for your business, this is where obviously the bigger creators who have got hundreds of thousands or even millions of followers, I think personally, are maybe missing the point a little bit. They've done all of the attention. They've distributed content and got that side of the content strategy nailed on. You know, they've done it to a point where they've got hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers. So their 1% to 3% is now a far, far, far greater number of people that they can sell to. And that are obviously going to come through inbound. Now, I'd also argue the case of the inbound stuff, and again, 1 to 3% of people aren't instantly then just going to keep coming inbound to you either. Most of the big creators that I see that are doing really, really well with the business are still doing outreach in the form of sending emails out to their audience every single day or every week, with obviously some sort of call to action to buy a product or a service that they're selling. So there's still an element of outbound that has to happen in the form of the email stuff. And then obviously from that, people are then getting back in touch and obviously booking a call or buying a product or buying a service or whatever it is. But their pool of people, because of the work that they've done to distribute the content at the start of their journey, and obviously their content strategy to build a huge following up, that's obviously worked for them, is now giving them a much larger pool of people to actually sell to. For me, whenever I've tried doing sales posts to my audience, I get very little sort of attention from that. It seems to be as soon as you put any sort of sales element into a post, the post will appear to tank. Now, again, I have had people come in from that sort of content where I've put a call to action at the end of a post and said, book a call, or this is my package offer, this is what I'm offering, this is the service that I'm offering. But in terms of the actual metrics of those type of posts, they do far, far less. You get hardly any impressions, you get hardly any engagement on the post, you might not get any comments, you might not get any likes. And for me, that is where the argument of not focusing on building attention or not focusing on growing your audience or not focusing on going viral kind of falls down a little bit. For us that are beginning our journeys or right at the very start or very early on in our journeys. So for me, what's going on in my head and what I'm thinking I'm going to focus on this year very much as my content strategy is just completely and utterly focusing on the very top of the funnel and focusing on generating as much attention for me and my business as is humanly possible. Now, the reason I'm thinking that is because I'm just seeing it as a numbers game. If I can grow my audience to 50,000, 100,000 people, 500,000 people, that 2 to 3% or that 1 to 3% of people who are ever going to be ready to buy is then going to be where I can obviously start to sustain the business in a longer term fashion, because the 1 to 3% of 500,000 followers is far, far greater than 1 to 3% of 9,000 followers. It's just simple maths. And that is definitely what I'm focusing on. Now, that's not to say that I'll be discounting doing the sales kind of post, because I definitely will be. But for me, I would say that 90% of the posts that I'm going to be putting out over the next 12 months is going to be very much focused on driving attention and getting as many followers into my audience as humanly possible across as many touch points as possible. So across LinkedIn, across Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as many places as I can get an audience, that is what I'm focusing on, just to play this simple numbers game. And then from that, I know that the numbers will obviously start to come, but it takes time. Obviously, in terms of growing an audience, it's not an overnight thing. But I am very much focused on looking for how I can make my content reach a much wider audience. Again, I'm not taking my foot off the idea of the audience still needs to be right. There's no point me putting content out there that's going to attract in people who are never ever going to want to buy a website from me. That's always front of my mind, but I'm very much focusing on building as much attention with as wider audience as possible of small business owners, of business owners, as I possibly can, and building my audience up so I can start to play that numbers game where I'm growing my email list, I'm growing my pool of people who are ready to buy. I've got more people in the pool of people that I can obviously start to nurture through my content and start obviously getting them prepped to sort of buy my product, my service, and going that sort of route. And yeah, it's always conflicted in your head when, like I say, you're seeing bigger creators. I think James Smith just put a post out this morning, a video out on YouTube saying antiviral, and obviously talking about that side of things. somebody who I follow very closely and actually work with on LinkedIn, who's got a far bigger audience than me on LinkedIn, has kind of said, you know, the virality side of things and focusing too much on that side of things and not trying to monetize your audience is the wrong way to go. So again, I'm conflicted in my head because there's people who are far ahead of me in their game that are obviously telling me not to do that. But for me, I think they've already done what I'm planning on doing now, and they've built the audience up, and now they are now in a position where they can focus more on probably 90% of their posts are going to be all to do with actually selling a product or a service because it works for them. The other factor as well that I'm thinking of is just from my own experience of actually consuming content across social media. Now, if I see a video on YouTube and it's got 1 or 2 views, I am far less likely to trust that content compared to a video next to it, maybe talking about exactly the same thing that's got hundreds of thousands of views. Just the same way as if I see a piece of content on LinkedIn where I'll 9 times out of 10, if it's a new person that I've not heard of before, I'll click into the profile. If I see they've got a huge following already, I will naturally trust that person more because human nature, herd mentality, you know, it's just human nature to follow the crowd. If you see somebody who's talking about one thing who's got millions of followers and you see somebody who's talking about literally exactly the same thing but they've got a couple of thousand followers, you're far more likely to trust the person with millions of followers over the person with 1,000 followers. It's as simple as that. I don't care what anybody says, you are more likely to trust that person. All these things, although a lot of people will say they're just vanity metrics and not to put too much weight onto them, how many followers you've got or how many likes or how many comments you get on your content, it's just vanity metrics and it doesn't mean anything. It's rubbish, you know. Yes, it is vanity metrics. Likes, follows don't pay the bills, but they certainly do help in terms of social proof when people are actually consuming your content as well. So for me, I'm all in on growing my audience as big as possible with getting as much attention as possible and not focusing quite as much on the sales. And I will still be continuing to do my outreach every single day and actually talking to my audience. But my goal, my number one goal this year is to grow my audience literally as big as possible across as many touch points as possible and then just play the numbers game from there. So that's my 2 pence worth on it. I could be completely wrong. I don't know. Maybe these bigger creators are right. Maybe the people that are telling me that what I'm thinking is wrong, I should listen to them. I don't know. But this is the joy of running a business solo. Sometimes you just have to trust your own instincts and trust your own knowledge and discount what the bigger people or people who are 10 steps ahead of you are telling you, because I find, from my experience, it can be easy for people who are well ahead of you in the game to have forgotten how they've actually got to where they are now. And it can be more dangerous than actually good, the advice that they're giving you. So that's my 2 pence on the topic. It could completely backfire. It might not even work, you know. I don't know. I've got to give it a try though, and that's exactly what I'm focusing on this year. And hopefully it works. Hopefully I get to the end of this year and I've hit my goal of 100,000 followers across social media. And then we'll see how sales go from there. Hopefully I've managed to build up 100,000 followers of actual decent quality audience people and not just a load of kids who are never going to buy from me. But yeah, that's kind of how it's going to go for me this year. I'm just going to check I've got everything on. Yeah, one other thing that I wanted to mention as well actually is, again, on the point of a lot of people will say don't focus too much on the vanity metrics, the likes, the engagement, that kind of stuff of a post, how many views your videos get. But from my own experience, when you're first starting out, when you get a post that does exceptionally well, which I've probably had 4 or 5 now, where they've got into the hundreds of thousands of impressions on LinkedIn, for instance, it's massive for your ego. And more importantly, it's absolutely massive for your motivation to continue doing it and to obviously keep at the game as well. Because when you've been at it for so long and you've never had a post do more than maybe a couple of thousand likes or a couple of thousand impressions or whatever it might be, you maybe had a video that's never gone over 100 views on YouTube. when you get a video that does well, or you get a post that does exceptionally well, it gives you a massive boost in terms of continuing on. And ultimately, that is where we're going to win as small business owners, is continuing to do the steps, continuing to take the reps, and continuing to be consistent with what we're doing. And if getting a viral post is what's needed for that, fantastic. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. What's your content strategy for 2026 and beyond? If you're a new creator maybe, and you're maybe around about the same level as me, you've got, I don't know, 9 or 10,000 followers across your social media, let me know how it's going for you. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you on the next video.